Welcome to Future Talk. This is the show that examines the global impact of technology and tries to see where it's leading us. Technology is changing the world at an extremely rapid rate, but have we really thought through the implications of these changes? Technology contains a lot of promise, but it also contains some perils. On Future Talk, we examine both the promise and the perils. On today's program, we're going to talk about a topic that's very much in the news, human genome research. We have three guests to cover it from three different angles. Gavin Sherlock is an assistant professor of genetics at Stanford Medical School. He'll discuss the latest scientific developments in genome research. Jack Porter is a Silicon Valley entrepreneur who's helped start several pharmaceutical companies. He's currently president and CEO of a company called Forward Innovations. He'll talk about the practical applications of genomics. And Mark Feldman, professor of biology and co-founder of the Human Genome Diversity Project at Stanford, will talk about the moral and ethical implications of genome research. We're going to start with Gavin Sherlock, but first, we have a short video that gives an introduction to genome science. Let's take a look.
If we could journey inside ourselves, into a cell, we would see 23 pairs of chromosomes packed into a nucleus. Each chromosome contains a long coil of DNA. If all the chromosomes were unwound, the DNA in just one of our cells would stretch 6 feet long. The DNA double helix contains 4 kinds of building blocks. An A always pairs with a T, a C with a G. DNA contains information to make every part of our bodies with its 4-letter language. Each of our thousands of genes codes for a specific part. RNA polymerase copies the information in a gene into a messenger molecule, messenger RNA. The building blocks of messenger RNA and DNA are called bases. The bases on one strand of the DNA specify the order of bases on the new strand of messenger RNA. The DNA always stays inside the nucleus, but messenger RNA travels out into the cytoplasm. There, a protein-making machine called a ribosome can read messenger RNA to make a particular protein. Every 3 bases of the messenger RNA molecule codes for an amino acid. Proteins are made of amino acids. tRNA molecules help translate the language of DNA and RNA into the language of proteins. tRNA molecules bring the right amino acids that the ribosome links together to make a protein. Proteins are the laborers. Some form structures like tendons and hair. Others perceive light, scents, and flavors, control chemical reactions, and carry messages between cells. To understand our molecular selves, scientists have read the 3 billion letters making up the DNA in the human genome. Different sets of genes interacting with complex environmental factors influence things like our looks, personalities, and risks for diseases like cancer and heart disease. A growing understanding of our genes and all they do will help us understand the complexity and the wonder of life.
That was a brief introduction to genome science. I'm talking with Gavin Sherlock. Gavin, what would you say is the most promising area in genome research right now?
Well, at the moment, research is really being driven by advances in technology. So the ability to sequence DNA is driving research forward at an incredible pace. So for example, the Human Genome Project to sequence those 3 billion bases took about a decade and took hundreds of scientists to do so. Now you can do a human genome for maybe $50,000 in a few months. And it's increasing probably so that, maybe in a year's time or 5 years' time, maybe it's going to be $1,000 for a human genome.
So what are some of the interesting things that we've found out about the human genome since we've been doing this research?
So there's a number of things that we've been able to find out. For example, one thing that was a big surprise to people is that there are genes which are present in some people, absent in other people, or maybe present in more than one copy in some people. Another project that's been receiving a lot of attention recently is something called the TCGA project, or Cancer Genome Atlas project. And what they've been doing is examining hundreds of cancer samples to identify genes which, for instance, might be turned on in cancer or turned off in cancer or amplified in cancer. And they've been really able to understand what pathways are changing in cancer, for example, in brain cancer or ovarian cancer. And the hope is that that's going to lead to either better diagnostics or better prognostics, so we might know how to better treat people with those diseases.
One thing that I've always been interested in is, does the genome code for intangible traits such as intelligence or personality, or is it all just physical characteristics?
It does encode for those intangible traits, at least to some extent. I mean, what we are is eventually a product of both our genes and our environment. And for many of these very difficult to understand traits, such as either intelligence or maybe something like schizophrenia, it's not just one gene, it's many, possibly dozens or even hundreds of genes that all each have a small influence. So yes, children might, who have smart parents might be more intelligent on average, but it's no means a certainty. It depends what their environment might be.
Is there such a thing as a gene that by itself increases the chances that you'll have some disease? Or, I mean, is it like a negative trait, or is it just a variant that gives some kind of weakness in a certain area?
For the most part, I think genes which contribute to disease are just natural variants of genes that normally carry out a job in the genome. They may be a mutation, or they may be a variant which, in most people, maybe it doesn't even make a difference, but the interaction with the environment might cause it to have an effect, such as lung cancer and smoking. If you didn't smoke, maybe you wouldn't get lung cancer, even though your genetics might predispose you to it.
Is there anything that scientists are really looking forward to discovering that they think they're pretty close to?
Well, I would say the things that we're looking forward to discovering are the things that we can't even imagine yet. For example, something called RNA interference. We didn't really know anything about that 15 years ago. We didn't even know it existed. But now we know that there's a whole network that cells use to regulate how their messages are turned into proteins. And I suspect there's lots more surprises like that out there for us.
We're going to move on to our next segment, which is talking about the practical applications of genome research. But first, we have a short video that demonstrates one such application. Let's take a look.
Imagine looking deep into your health future. Am I predisposed to type 2 diabetes? Or am I likely to develop cancer? What about Parkinson's, blood clots, or a stroke? What once may have seemed like science fiction is now a reality for the patients and staff at Palomar Pomerado Health. PPH is now partnering with a company that specializes in genetic testing, 23andMe, based in Silicon Valley. 23 being the number of chromosomes in our DNA. Here's how it works. You begin by purchasing a $399 test kit at a PPH Express Care Center inside Albertsons or at the Pomerado Outpatient Pavilion. Sending in your DNA is as simple as providing a saliva sample. Your DNA is then extracted and analyzed using DNA chips made by San Diego-based Illumina. The system can read more than 500,000 points in a person's genome and can estimate your predisposition to more than 100 traits and conditions.
Well, the great thing about the PPH partnership is you can walk into any of these express clinics and you can actually pick up a kit right there. You can spit and submit your sample, and anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks later, you'll get an email saying that your data is ready, and then it's something you'll be able to explore with your family and you'll be able to explore with your physician.
23andMe's DNA test kit was Time Magazine's Invention of the Year in 2008.
And it's great to have an institution like PPH that is really focused on preventing disease rather than just treating it.
23andMe is a personalized genetic blueprint of your health, and the information is invaluable when developing a preventative healthcare plan. If you know you're predisposed to a particular illness or condition, you can take steps to reduce your risk. Your doctor can even use the data to help select which medications will have the most impact. It's all there inside your DNA.
I'm talking with Jack Porter. And Jack, I understand that you took that genome test.
Yeah.
Did it reveal anything unexpected?
I guess so. There was one indicator that showed up that was for cystic fibrosis that I didn't know that I had a way of getting to. But I actually found it very, very interesting. The website itself is real interesting. It kind of gives you 4 different things. One of the items is that it tells you about your family. It tells you your heritage, where you likely your ancestors were, and from country to country. It then also shows what's called your journal, which if you have any indicator will tell you all the new research going on in that specific indicator. And then finally it can do a lot of research. So if you say, well, if I have a thing for cystic fibrosis, I want to research what could I do about that, what are the items that I should be looking for and things to that effect.
Is this test in pretty final form as is, or is there an expectation that there will be better and more accurate tests that will reveal more in the future?
Well, they said it started off with about 500,000 of these items on it, and they're saying they're going to get it over 1 million. So I expect that to continue to go. And the price has really come down. It started off at about $1,000. Now it's down to about $400, and they say they're going to get it to about $99. And my expectation is once they get it to there, they'll start adding some premium products that'll provide you even more information.
Now, aside from this genome testing, what other sorts of applications are coming out of this genome research that's going on?
Well, a lot of my companies work in the clinical space, and one of the things you're seeing in the clinical space is genomics is really helping us get a lot more chemical drugs to market. If you look from 2000 to 2005, about 8% of the chemical drugs made it to market, where the gene drugs it was about 34%. So there's been a big increase in the success of these drug treatment programs. We're also seeing it in recruitment, where they're beginning to use these kind of indicators to determine who are the best patients to recruit into clinical studies. And you're also seeing it within the clinical studies, where they're doing things that are called adaptive trials, and they'll actually change the trial based on the way that the drug is working with a specific type.
So the genome knowledge actually allows a better tracing of how the medicine interacts, so you can get a more accurate view of what the medicine actually does?
Or how it's affecting specific people with specific gene types.
So what's being worked on for the future? I mean, where is this all going as far as practical uses?
Well, I think that more and more we're going to get more used to it and understand, what we can do with it. And then as the technologies come on, I think that it'll get more into the public using it as opposed to just research being done on it.
So does it look like we're going to get to the point that everybody automatically gets their genome tested, they get a likely profile of how their life is going to develop at a very early age, and they can start making plans based on that?
Well, I definitely think it'll go that way, because personalized medicine is becoming more and more, and this is kind of the crux of what personalized medicine is going to be. So I think understanding what your gene type is like, and understanding how you can improve your own personal health is going to be something that everybody's going to be focused on.
Is there any reason why somebody would not want to get this test?
Well, definitely the privacy issues that you end up dealing with. I think everybody has those kind of risks associated with it. And I think it's what we don't know. It's kind of we know what we know, but we don't know what we don't know.
Now, so far we're talking basically about medicine. Are there any applications that go beyond medicine? For example, nobody really understands how intelligence works. Nobody really understands how a lot of things work. Does this give insight that will help us understand many aspects of life?
Well, I think that it's kind of two different things. Part of it is your genes, and how you're made up that way, but also it's how you were raised, what you learned, in the method that you would learn that in. So I think that it's not just because your genes are this way, you're going to turn out this way. I think a lot of that is environmental.
Okay. We're going to move along to our next segment, which is about the moral and ethical issues of genomics. But I have a short video first, which introduces some of the issues. Let's go ahead and roll that tape.
The scientists who launched the Human Genome Project believed in the power of genetic information to transform healthcare, to allow earlier diagnosis of diseases than ever before possible, and to fuel the creation of powerful new medicines. But it was also clear that genetic information could potentially be used in ways that are hurtful or unfair. For example, denying health insurance because of an increased risk for developing a particular disease. Aware of the danger and hoping to ward it off, the founders of the Human Genome Project created a program to explore the ethical, legal, and social implications of new genetic knowledge. The goal was to anticipate problems that might arise and to prompt solutions. For example, in the future, doctors will likely be able to give each of us a genetic report card that will spell out our risk of developing a variety of different diseases. But will we really want that information? How will it be used? Who will have access to our genetic information? How will it affect our lives, our families, and our communities? The challenge of addressing these issues is not reserved for scientists. We all have a stake in making sure that everyone will benefit from genetic research and no one is harmed.
And now I'm talking to Mark Feldman. The narrator in that film said that genetic research should be done in such a way that nobody is harmed. Is that even theoretically possible?
I think it's possible to minimize the chance that negative outcomes to the public or to individuals can occur. I don't think we've come far enough along in the data privacy issue area yet to be able to guarantee that a database of genotypes is fully 100% protected from, say, hacking. I think that the narrator also gave the impression that your genotype at birth behaved like a blueprint. And a blueprint is what an architect uses to design exactly what you want him to design, or her. For my in my opinion, a blueprint is the wrong analogy to use, because the blueprint changes daily from conception to death, and one needs to keep in mind that there are interactions between the different parts of the DNA, between the DNA and the environment, that are going on all the time.
But we're dealing with probabilities here. So if your genome indicates that maybe you have a higher chance than average of getting a certain disease, the insurance company might say, well, we don't want to take you on because you're probably going to cost us a lot of money.
There have been congressional actions that have made the insurance companies not able to do that. But we need to understand what risk means. And the general public on the whole is not well trained in interpreting what it means to say that there is a 5% added risk to getting coronary artery disease if I carry an A here instead of a T. That's a process of education that both geneticists, genetic counselors, and good companies like 23andMe need to spend a lot of energy transmitting. For most complex traits, we don't know enough to predict a lot better than, say, economists can predict when there's going to be a recession.
But is there an expectation that as the science gets better, we will be able to predict?
There is definitely that expectation. Among practicing human population geneticists, there are different opinions as to how strongly they believe that that's likely to be the case, even with the sequencing of the 1,000 genomes, which is currently going on, which is the successor to what was called the HapMap project, which didn't sequence but genotyped millions and millions of the A's and T's and G's and C's in 300 odd people from 3 areas of the world. The questions that come up are diseases the consequence of rare variation or common variation? Are diseases susceptible to other biological interventions at different times of the life? Do identical genotypes produce identical phenotypes? Interesting studies recently on pairs of identical twins.
And the phenotype is the outer appearance of the person?
That's correct, which could be a disease, or it could be height, for instance. But one of the studies on identical twins revealed that a certain part of the way genes act in those identical twins was really rather different, and it differed more the more their lifestyles differed. There's a Spanish study that was published in 2005. So blueprint it isn't, and we need to keep that in mind.
So you're saying the genome doesn't really predict as much as some people think it does?
Yes, that's what I think we need to be careful of, because one has the idea that eventually people will be able to interfere with the genotype of their offspring and produce...
As in changing it?
That's right, to produce something that they think they would be preferable for either them or their child in the long run during that child's life. And this is likely to be quite dangerous.
Is that theoretically possible? I mean, is research being done now that would lead to the ability to alter the genome of a person?
Gavin is better qualified to answer that, but I think my opinion is that the risks of doing that by interfering with how the rest of the genome functions in a complicated organism like a human are too great. But in other organisms, it might work.
Yeah, so there's a lot of research which comes under the umbrella of gene therapy, where the goal is, if there's a faulty gene in somebody, can we replace that with a good copy of the gene, or just add a good copy of the gene without replacing the faulty copy?
But the genome is in every bodily cell, right? So what are you replacing?
So, for example, something like cystic fibrosis, the goal is to maybe have some kind of spray that you'd be able to inhale, and it would be able to affect, for instance, the lung epithelium, which are the cells that are defective, where you need that cystic fibrosis protein to work. But lots of these gene therapy trials have actually ended in disastrous results, where a gene has been inserted into somebody and it's ended up causing cancer in them. There was a famous clinical trial in France where patients ended up dying because of that.
But that doesn't necessarily stop the march of research, does it?
It does not. It does not. And many of these studies, they start out in animals. So, for example, they were able to cure dogs of haemophilia, but when they try and bring that into humans, they find that it doesn't work how they expected it to work based on those studies.
I know that a lot of people are studying the ethics of genome research, and I know you're involved in some of this, Professor Feldman. What are some of the most significant issues right now involving ethics?
Well, one of the things I think that the genome research of the last, say, 5 or 6 years has revealed is the lack of meaning, biological meaning, in the concept of race. And that we now have a concept of ancestry and continental ancestry, and that vast numbers of people on this planet have ancestries that reside in different continents. So do we say that somebody who has ancestors that come from Asia, Europe, and the Americas has a race of some type or other? And I've coined the term ancestry group, that I think should replace the term race for biologists, because so many people have ancestries that come from different places, and that has been revealed by the technology that has allowed us to explore how much variation there is across the whole of that 3 billion genome.
I think there's some possible political issues involved with this, because people might be concerned that this research would lead people to think that, well, if you have certain ancestry or certain race, that means you probably have certain other traits as well, and it's another way of categorizing people. That could be a bit of a hot potato.
I think that's right, but I think the research has shown that the typological kind of classification that you're talking about has not been borne out by the DNA variation that we've seen over the past 5 years.
Is there any risk that this genome knowledge could be misused, like we're opening up a can of worms that could have harmful consequences?
I think there is, and I think the rise of racism is a possibility. And I've advocated having a ready response team of scientists who should monitor such misuses and squash them before they get to be widely accepted.
What do you think the ultimate direction of this is? Like, are we going to learn all there is to know about the genome, and then what? We can create, perfect people, or people who are disease-free? I mean, where's this taking us?
It'll be a long time before we know all there is about the genome, especially when it comes to resistance to infectious diseases, which is one of the really great research areas for human genetics.
Well, I have more questions I could ask, but I'm getting the signal that we do have to wrap. I'd like to thank my three distinguished guests for being here: Gavin Sherlock, Jack Porter, and Mark Feldman. Thank you very much. We do have a surprise special guest to close the show with. Douglas Engelbart is here, one of the leading Silicon Valley pioneers, inventor of the computer mouse, one of the country's leading scientists. In fact, this show and many other projects are to a large degree inspired by his work, and he's going to close the show with a few words. Doug, take it away.
Hi, I'm Doug Engelbart. I've devoted my whole career to help mankind be able to solve its problems better. So thanks for watching, and come join us.
I'm Molly McGee. I'm an ecofuturist, and I encourage you to embrace the future and use the tools that have been created to make it a sustainable and healthy future for everyone.